This week, while preparing for our time together, I was reminded once more that Jesus' mission on earth was one of reconciliation, liberation, justice, and healing. As it turns out, that's our calling as well. Remember that list that we looked at last week, Romans 12? And if we would carry this out every day, we would be bringing about healing, reconciliation, justice, and liberation or salvation in and through in our world. What an honor it is for us to be called by our Creator to work alongside of God to build a loving community. Last week's gospel showed us how we, like Peter and apparently some of the other disciples, didn't grasp what it meant for Jesus to be the Messiah. They didn't realize that their calling alongside of Jesus's would involve sacrifice, surrendering one's ego, and giving up the urge, the need for a top-down power. In today's reading, Jesus continues teaching his disciples practices that are needed to build a loving community of faith. Jesus goes straight to that hot button issue that we love to put under the rug: conflict. Now, I don't know about you. Conflict isn't a happy place for me. How are you with conflict? You don't have to say it out loud, but answer that for yourself. How are you with conflict? Early in my ministry, I took a class on conflict transformation. Notice it's transformation, not resolution. It's an ongoing experience. And one of the books that was required was entitled, "Never Call Them Jerks." Kind of goes along the line of Jesus and Paul calling us to bless our enemies, honor one another, practice hope, and don't do any of that fake sugary love, the kind that you are nice on the outside, but you're seething on the inside. Conflicts happen. And genuine loving each other when conflicts arise will involve confronting. Now, when I wrote this a couple days ago, I thought the word confronting sounded kind of good, but sometimes to us that word confronting scares us. It sounds so mean and in your face. That's not what I'm talking about, and we'll look at it a little bit more. We are called to make amends, to do the work of reconciling relationships. It's true. Church can be a place where there's a lot of conflict, where we bug one another, even to the point of exasperation. It used to concern me that church life involved conflict. Now I have come to realize that it makes a lot of sense. You know, you have heard me talk about how much I love to go to my coffee shop in the mornings on Sunday mornings. Sunday morning, I drive in, I'm the first customer. They haven't even put the open up sign yet. And I walk in and they go, "Good morning, Mary." And they poured me the cup of coffee that I need this morning. And we exchanged that cheers, like that TV show, the Cheers kind of moment. And I have told you how I love going to Trader Joe's because they extend hospitality. They don't know my name, but they know what I'm going to make for dinner. I have zero conflict in those places. Zero. Now, there are times that I'm annoyed because the coffee has too much of something or not enough of something else, or that Trader Joe's took my favorite product off the shelf and I wasn't warned. But here's the thing. If I worked day in and day out with these folks, conflicts would arise, that deeper kind. someone would say something that would offend me, or I would offend them. And the same goes for church life. The more we are involved, the more we make meals for friends in the desert, or we're working on committees, conflict, differences arise. But here's the thing. Working them out will bring us into a tighter community of faith, a more loving community of faith. Jesus, in this Matthew portion of Scripture, gives guidelines so that the disciples will grow together as a community of the beloved. And these practices are helpful for us today. We love singing that the world will know we are Christians by our love, but love becomes stronger when it's tested. When the parties involved work through their differences, when the community works together, then the world will see our love. Now, before we head into these practices, I want to point something out. This is not a magical step-by-step how-to. You don't whip this out and bring it to your friend and say, okay, first we're going to do this. We are not products that we buy from IKEA. In different pieces that have notations on them on each piece, and then there's this sheet of paper that you look at, and you're very careful, and you have lots and lots of patience, and then within an hour, perhaps, you produce the thing that you saw in the showroom, and you're all happy. We humans are more complex. There's more nuances to our transformation of our conflicts. We all know conflicts don't resolve in an hour's time. We are always on an ongoing process of growth. And the second point I want to go to is I want to go straight to the end of our reading, a verse that is too often used for magical wishes. But when we use it in this context, they are most dynamic. So let me read it to you in the New Revised Standard, and it should be on the screen, I believe. I tell you, if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where there are 2 or 3 gathered in my name, I am among them. This is not that you're going to hope that you're going to get a brand new car tomorrow. This is about Jesus saying, disciples, Green Valley Church, remember, I will be with you. And wherever you have conflict, don't lose hope. Pause and remember, I am with you. Have no fear. We can work the conflict out together. That's where the 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. Friends, this is all about our relationships. God is inviting us into deeper individual and communal relationship. You all know Jesus is not that servicey type of person. Jesus always goes deeper. So what is Jesus telling us to do when someone in the church harms us, seriously harms us? Firstly, deal with it. Don't let it fester so that it gets blown out of proportion. I don't know about you, but the more I think and ruminate over an issue over and over, doesn't it get bigger? You don't even have to tell anybody, and all of a sudden, it's there. We often avoid conflict, and Jesus is saying, don't avoid conflict. Withdrawing from the conflict, refusing to discuss it, will only make matters worse. Sometimes we avoid conflict by changing the topic, making peace without addressing the issue. In other words, putting it under the rug. Another way, a common way of conflict is actively aggressive. I'm going to try to stand over here, see if that works. Okay. I hope you can move the camera. Passive-aggressively. And we do this by name-calling. You might not say it to that person's face, but maybe you say it to a friend. Oh, she's such a blah, blah, blah. Hurling insults, giving backhanded compliments, using sarcasm. And these are all ways that we passively, aggressively avoid the conflict. Conflict avoidance is actually a type of people-pleasing because we have this fear that we might upset the person that we have this conflict with. And so we will go behind their back to talk to somebody else about it. The crazy thing is, people-pleasing usually causes more conflict in the end. So rather than avoid, Jesus is saying right up front, deal with the conflict or misunderstanding. Number 2, communicate directly to the person rather than gossip. If you are feeling offended or critical, don't go and tell someone else. I know that we rationalize in our minds and we tell our friends that if I talk it over with this person, then I'll see it more clearly and maybe it's not a big deal. We're actually avoiding contact with that person. If possible, go one-on-one. This allows the person to clear up any misunderstanding or to provide opportunity to apologize and make amends, all the while saving face. This approach implicitly says, I respect you enough to give you space to make things right. And by the way, you already know this, you need to do I statements, right? It doesn't help to come barreling into somebody's office or at dinner and say really nasty things to them, but to share from yourself, I felt this way. I was hurt by your tone of voice the other day, or I'm feeling left out in the decision-making when you're going to discuss the color of parking lot lights. These are things that pastors hear about. The thing is, if we don't go directly to the person who has harmed us and we go to others, we triangulate. We drag that person into our fractured relationship. The whole reason for Jesus' teaching is to help the church, our communities of faith, to be wholesome, loving, restorative places to belong. But what if that person doesn't hear you out? Now, remember, this is over serious offenses. They're not about preferences, like the color of the lights in the parking lot. If your one-on-one approach didn't work out, well, the suggestion is to bring one or two others as a witness to your conversation. This is not about bringing a friend or two to gang up on that one person. I have found it helpful to also invite the person who I'm in conflict with to bring someone along of their choice to witness the conversation, to hear me and that person talk it through. This again communicates the same respect and humility of the one-on-one approach, while at the same time adding the wisdom and experience of one or two others. In some situations, a third party's perspective can help two parties in conflict find common ground and a way forward. Now, what do you do if you can't find common ground and here you are, you can't go forward? Jesus says, treat them as you would a Gentile and a tax collector. In other words, as outsiders. How does Jesus treat outsiders? With love. With boundaries, yes. but not being mean-spirited. So much more could be said about boundaries in relationship and how loving doesn't mean that people-pleasing, but we'll have to leave that for another time. The point today is Jesus is calling for an open communication. The Spirit flows during loving, open communication. Communication without secret agendas. Direct communication that is honoring and respecting the other and is always enveloped in love. That, my friends, is how we can become a beloved community and an open community of faith. Amen.